Great. Okay. It says that it's recording. Hi. So I'm here today to talk about the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, better known as the JET program. So a little bit about me. My name is Adrian. I was brought up just outside of Chicago. I was on JET for 5 years, which is the maximum number of years that you can do the JET program, from 2011 to 2016 in Okinawa Prefecture. Outside of the classroom, I was involved in the LGBTQ support group Stonewall Japan, as well as the Special Olympics. So, JET is one of the world's largest English teaching programs. In the late 80s, the Japanese government sat down and essentially came up with this idea that they wanted folks to come to Japan and be entrenched in local communities and kind of have the community members learn about the visitors and the visitors learn about Japan, and then everybody gets excited about learning about each other, and then the sphere of interest grows and grows and grows. And so that was kind of the grassroots beginnings of the JET program. And in 1987, which is the first year that we were in operation, there were only 4 countries involved, which was the US, Australia, Canada, and England. And then over the years, we've grown, and there are now 57 participating countries. And last year, there were a little under 6,000 JETs in Japan. So the numbers over the years have kind of grown and then dipped a little bit, but we seem to be back on the rise. Is a paid full-time job opportunity. It's not a study abroad or volunteer program. There's no summer programs. There's no internships. These are some questions that I get a lot at, like career fairs and things like that. But like I mentioned earlier, you are posited into like a local Japanese neighborhood and you become part of the scenery, essentially. So it's a fully immersive program. And this year, with everybody having a lot of remote concerns, it is 100% online for the application process, which is, one less thing to worry about. There are 2 different types of positions on the JET program. That's the Assistant Language Teacher, or the ALT, as well as the Coordinator of International Relations, or CIR. A majority of JETs are ALTs. I was an ALT. Most people I know were an ALT. And as an ALT, you can either be based in a single school, so Misato High School, an example of one, and then you would have 1 or 2 visiting schools that you would visit once or twice a week. Or you can be a rotating ALT, which means that you'd be based in a board of education. So for my first 3 years, I was a rotating ALT, and so I had 6 schools, and I would visit each of them. I would go to a different one every day, and then sometimes I would switch after lunch. And then I transferred, which is a whole different thing, and was based in a senior high school and had 2 visiting schools. So one of the things that is unique about the JET program is we do not require Japanese language skills, and a large part of why we're able to do that, as an ALT, you are team teaching with a Japanese teacher of English. And so somebody is always there in the classroom to help you out, to make sure that the students understand. You're there as a team. There's always like a tag team partner there for you to rely on. And so you're kind of there to be the native voice and the window into parts of your own personal background. You help motivate the students. You create games. You work on the different English language contests that exist. There are a lot of those contests. There's like skit, story, poem, debate, and then there's like PowerPoint contests and things like that, spelling. There's a whole bunch. And much like any kind of workplace, the amount of freedom and responsibility and kind of like leading role percentages that you would have as a teacher will really vary based on your relationship with your Japanese teacher of English. Outside of the classroom, you may be asked to participate in all kinds of things. These are some of the more common ones. There are holiday parties, and so those may be with or without the students, because a lot of the time the staff will get together and have just like, oh, wow, the semester sure is over type of parties. But you may have different holiday parties with your students. I really liked to get my students to make Halloween masks and jack-o'-lanterns. You may be asked to chaperone on field trips. You won't be chaperoning alone, so don't worry about it too much. Um, a lot of folks join extracurriculars or after school clubs, things like, tea ceremony or calligraphy, Kyudo, different kinds of Japanese martial arts or different traditional arts. But they may also ask you to at least help out a little bit with English club if it exists. And then sports festivals, you will almost certainly be asked to be involved in at least one silly event where like you might like pop a balloon with your butt and then try to find a person who matches the description on the little slip of paper that was inside the balloon. You have to like run out into the crowd and find them and give them a thing the whole time. But the whole school comes together and does these things as kind of like a team morale boosting sort of thing. On the other hand, the coordinator of international relations position, there are significantly fewer of them. And part of that is because we ask for a very high level of Japanese language ability when it comes to the CIRs. We ask for somewhere around JLPT N2. We don't need you to have ever actually taken the test or have the certificate in hand. It's just kind of giving you an idea of what we're looking for. These folks work primarily in local government offices. And then circling back for a second, so don't forget, when it comes to the CIR position, we really want to incentivize people to apply for it if they think they're qualified. And so in the application portal, there will be a short test that gives you an idea of the kind of language skills that they're looking for. The score for this test isn't recorded at all. You can continue applying even if you don't pass it. And then there is a checkbox on the CIR application that says, if for whatever reason my Japanese language skills aren't found to be high enough, please consider me for the ALT position. And so, we really want folks to if they think they might have enough ability for a CIR to really just kind of go for it, so that you're not like wasting your shot if you apply for CIR. But if you are a CIR, you will be very busy doing a lot of simultaneous interpretation or translation of documents. You'll be there for press conferences and meetings and things like that. You'll help facilitate sister city relationships, which is really important over in Japan. You might have some newsletters, and then you may actually still also teach English, significantly less often than an ALT would, but you would be probably teaching either like an elderly group of like an English conversation club, or you would do like English language picture book story time at a library for little kiddos. So when it comes to your workplace, this is a pretty standard looking school, and here's like the front yard and the gym and things. So you are employed by your contracting organization, and I know that sounds slightly counterintuitive, but what that means is the JET program is the kind of idea that gets you over to Japan, and then your contracting organization takes it from there, essentially. So when I apply for jobs, I can mention in the tiny text that it was part of the JET program, but when I say who employed me, I say the Motobu Town Board of Education. And so for the 2021 cycle only, the contracts will be 10 months long. This is in part because originally we thought that we were going to be sending people over at the same time as the Olympics. So we may still be doing that if the Olympics are still happening. Or we're not sending them over at the same time. The Olympics might be happening. It's all confusing. But the time that we typically send jets over was right in the middle of the games, and the idea of trying to get hotel rooms and transportation and make sure that people don't get lost at the airport at the same time as all that happening sounded really chaotic. And so they decided to just shift departure 2 months later than they usually would. And that's going to happen whether or not the Olympics do. Every year before and after will be a 12-month period that usually begins in July, and that can be up to 5 years. Oh, before I forget again, at your contracting organization, there's going to be a person who is the JET supervisor. So part of their job is that they help you get all your utilities set up, they help you open a bank account, they get your alien registration card settled, They help you find an apartment or figure out housing however you need to. They remind you when you need to, pay certain things on your car if you have a car. You can ask them to help translate, a piece of mail that you got. You don't know what it says. But so there's somebody there whose job it is to make sure that you are not like drowning, essentially. So that's another reason why folks can feel okay not necessarily having any Japanese skills. So we hope that by the time you get there, you have a little bit, and I'll get to that later. So the work hours and holidays are pretty standard for this kind of work in Japan. Your start and end time may be slightly different based on your own situation. Mine was a little bit different because they knew I had to go to so many different schools. Every contract has at least 10 paid vacation per year. Some of them are more. I had 20, for example, every year. It all kind of depends, but the bare minimum is 10. And then Japan has 15 days of paid national holidays per year. So, on those long weekends, you can explore your local community, or you can, branch out to different parts of Japan, or go international if you really feel like it. So every jet across the entirety of Japan is paid the exact same amount of money. And that amount of money increases a little bit every year that you're on the program. Except once you get to year 4, it stays there, and then year 5 is the same amount. Year 1, the number would make more sense if the other 2 months worth of paycheck were in there. It's a little bit, there's usually this is up by 3 every time, but it's fine. It's enough to survive on. I don't convert these into dollars anymore, in part because you receive them in yen, and in part because the amount changes so often. If you want reference in your own time, that's fine. I just don't do it in the presentations anymore because I don't want to give inaccurate information. We provide all of your transportation to and from Japan at the beginning and the end of your contract, which is to say that when I left Chicago in 2011 and when I came back from Okinawa in 2016, all of my transportation on both ends were covered. If I wanted to come back to the States anytime between that, though, that was on my own dime. And then you're enrolled in the national health insurance, which means that you may wait a little bit longer in the waiting room, but you will probably pay significantly less than you're used to paying for just about any medical kind of situation. When it comes to living situations, one of the unofficial mottos of the JET program is every situation is different. We are a national program. We put folks from the very tippy top of Hokkaido to Okinawa, and so it's really hard to give a hard and fast this is what happens to every jet generalization about just about anything, and housing definitely falls under there. I've ever heard of folks, I feel like mostly I hear of folks in single occupancy apartments somewhere around like $600 a month. But I've also heard of folks who have, a 2-story house to themselves. I've heard of Board of Education's renting out entire apartment complexes and then putting all of their ALTs in there. And the ALTs pay a certain amount a month that's subsidized, but the Board of Education owns everything that they put in the apartment. So like, different appliances and furniture and stuff like that. And so it's like you have all these things, you don't get to choose them. I lived in teacher housing for a couple of years. The deal with teacher housing is that it was built 30 years ago at least, and then nobody's really kept it up since then. So when I first moved in, I had to clean out 3 years worth of dust and dead bugs and things like that. But it was $60 a month. But because it was $60 a month and nobody did any upkeep, a pipe burst in the ceiling at one point and like destroyed a lot of my things. And that's what happens when you pay $60 for rent. One thing that I will also point out is that I have heard of folks who are in more urban settings living in share houses to make things a little bit cheaper, which transitions nicely into placements. I feel like it's fairly common knowledge that most people in the JET program are placed in smaller towns or in more rural areas, though it is like Osaka or Tokyo. There are just very few of those. When you are applying, you are able to give us a general preference of, urban, suburban, rural, or island. And then you can request up to 3 specific locations, whether that's, Tohoku region, the prefecture, or the specific town. Um, when you list those, or you could list none, just as a separate thing. But when you list those, you have space to explain why. Reasons like this city and mine are sister cities. I studied abroad here. I have family here. I want to study something that is indigenous to this region only, or I have a medical condition and I need to be near hospital facilities, are seen as more valid reasons than I've just really always wanted to be in Tokyo. Um, so, think about those sorts of things. If you don't have a specific place in mind, a lot of what I've given it as advice for folks is think about what you do in your daily life here and what's really important to you, and whether or not you would be able to access those sorts of things in Japan, and kind of try to figure out from there what's important. Because if you give a more obscure place as your request, you're more likely to get it, I think. So when it comes to urban placement, you're more likely to meet more Jets and more people who've ever met foreigners before. There's also access to Japanese language schools, so they have teachers and formalized curriculum. You don't have to drive 3 hours for cheese. Um, and if you don't want to drive in Japan, actually that's a separate thing I should talk about. If you don't want to drive in Japan, you should not make it obvious on your application that you are capable of driving. A lot of the time, even if you say that you would rather not, Tokyo will see, you have a driver's license and you'd rather not, is still, there's still some wiggle room there. That means that you still can, though. So if you don't want to drive in Japan, don't tell me that you are capable at all. But anyway, you'll be closer to public transportation over here. Whereas in rural placements, you have cheaper, larger housing. You're more likely to encounter a lot more traditional or like regional activities, like folks doing traditional dance, or if there's like a craft that's local to the area, or if you want to experience like a Japanese farm share, that type of thing. You'll have more opportunities to practice Japanese, in part because there are more likely going to be fewer people who speak English. So support while you're on JET. If you become certified to teach English as a foreign language, if you don't already have it, while you're on JET, you can apply for this grant, and we pay back a portion of the amount of money that it took you to be certified. And then when it comes to the Japanese language proficiency test, we cover the cost of the test if you are applying for N1 through N3. If you have something below that, you just gotta gambare. Like I mentioned, we don't require Japanese language skills, but we do try to give you some of them. Before you leave, we give you a textbook that teaches you 2 of the alphabet systems, as well as introductory dialogues and things like where's the bathroom, I need to see a doctor, that kind of thing. We give you that before you leave at all. And you up for, or we don't sign you up. You can sign up if you would like to, for about 6 months worth of Japanese language skills for free online, in these 3 levels. And then if you pass advanced Japanese, you're able to apply for the translation and interpretation course, which culminates in a conference in Shiga Prefecture where you end up doing simultaneous interpretation in front of Japanese government officials. Another resource that we have for folks who are on JET is AJET, which is a volunteer organization of current JET participants. They operate on both a national and a prefectural level, and what they do is at least once a month or so, they will offer some kind of professional development or social or athletic kind of event, just to kind of get Jets from different regions connected with one another. They also have an online magazine where you can get published maybe once a quarter or so. And then they have a counseling service where there is a service that already exists called Tokyo English Lifeline, where if you were having, any sort of issues with your mental health, or if you need somebody to talk to, you can call them and you'll have somebody to talk to in English. But there is a point in the evening where they shut off, essentially. an AJet has somebody on call at all points to cover the time where Tokyo English Lifeline is not in operation. So you're never without the chance to talk to somebody in English. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there are special interest groups like Stonewall Japan, which is LGBTQ. There's Jets of African Descent, Vegetarian Jet. I think there's Jet Christian Fellowship. There's a whole bunch of these sorts of things. I'll put a link in the chat just so that folks from different places have a chance to chat with each other about things that are important to them. And then once you are through with your JET tenure, the JET Alumni Association exists everywhere. We have those 57 other countries that are participating countries, and so there's at least one national one everywhere. And then there are some smaller regional ones usually. The one closest to us is New England Jet Alumni Association. And they are a great way to network and connect with people about memories of Japan. They do a lot of mentorship sorts of things and job opportunities. I think any JETA right now is doing an event where if you register, they will send you several different kinds of Japanese teas and how to prepare them, and then a Zoom link where you can all taste them together, which is really nice. A nice way to connect remotely. JET. Because we look for folks from all different kinds of backgrounds, there's probably a JET in any given field at this point, but I feel like some of the trends are, folks go into any kind of teaching. I've known folks who go into foreign service, working for the US State Department, folks who go into Japan-specific tourism, and that sort of thing. But yeah, so when it comes to the application process, to apply through the US portal of the JET program, you have to have US citizenship. If you don't have US citizenship, that doesn't mean that you can't apply. You should just check that list of 57 participating countries to see whether or not your country of origin is on there or not. If it is, that's great. That means that somebody at the Japanese embassy of your country of origin is the JET program coordinator, and they can tell you exactly what the application process is. If your country of origin is not on that list, that doesn't mean that you can't apply. That just means that you might have to personally reach out to the Japanese embassy of your country of origin and see what the deal is, whether or not you can apply, what the next steps would be. The next thing is that we ask that you have a bachelor's degree. If you are in your senior year, as long as you have a bachelor's degree by August 15th of 2021, then you can apply before you graduate. Otherwise, you should hold off for a little while. And the rest of these are not super relevant to folks who haven't already been on the JET program for too long. But so these are other things to consider. So the timeline, if you decided that you wanted to spend this snowy Friday opening the application and doing it right now, that is a thing you could totally do because it's open and it will close November 20th at 11:59 Hawaii Standard Time. So please make sure that you look up when that is in Eastern, because I still haven't done that, even though I probably should. But that's when the application portal will close forever, well, for this year. The interviews are going to be a little bit later than usual. They're going to be in late February or early March, and we are endeavoring as much as possible to make these remote, just for everybody's safety, but we haven't had confirmation as to whether or not we're going to be allowed to have that happen yet. And then after that, this is the schedule as currently planned. If this schedule changes at all, any of the updates will be available on the JET Program USA website, as well as our social media. It's all online this year. All of your required materials can be submitted online using the online portal. If you have like questions to put on the application, you can email me. If you have questions about like this button in the application portal isn't working, the JET inbox, which is within the portal itself, and they can help you kind of troubleshoot through that. They also have a really extensive FAQ, which might just be worth looking at in the first place. It's got a lot of good info there. So some hints when it comes to the application is you should read everything super carefully. Make sure that you're answering the correct question, that you're answering it completely. should leave as few fields empty as possible, because every year we have about 4,000 Americans apply for the JET program, and then ultimately about 1,000 of them make it through at the end nationally. And so the clearer an idea we have of you as a person, the more likely it is that will not make it through. Let's see. What else? Get somebody who you know and love to proofread your entire application, or who you know and love and you trust to be super honest with you is the thing. Because for a lot of these, you need somebody to be like, nope, that sentence didn't make any sense. You got to cut that. Don't talk about this, that kind of thing. You're going to need to submit 2 letters of reference for this for the application. Something that I've told people recently is that you should have the sort of relationship with those people where you can remind them as it's getting close to the deadline that they need to submit, because if they don't, then your application doesn't progress. You'll be able to see whether or not they've submitted. You can't see the content because that's how letters of recommendation work. But um, if they haven't submitted and there's only a couple of days left, make sure that you feel comfortable going, hey, please help. You should also make sure that the people who are writing your recommendation know a little bit about the program and how you're a good fit for it, and make sure that that they know you and that they like you enough to write more than like 2 sentences, because those are the saddest letters to read. I am almost certainly forgetting another piece of hints that I usually give, but I'm going to keep going and I'm sure it'll occur to me super soon. Right, I did remember it just now. uh, the essay prompt is essentially why Japan, and they give you 2 pages to write it. And a lot of folks will write for 1 page and 3/4 about how much they love Japan and they've always wanted to go to Japan, and they completely forget to tell me or whoever's reading the application why they are a great candidate for the program and why Japan would benefit from their presence. And so make sure that you also talk about like why you are a good candidate. Loving Japan is not necessarily enough. And if you can't think of any good things about yourself, badger all your friends and family to compliment you and then use those in the thing. And just a note when it comes to grading applications, because I mentioned a few times now, the grading is nationalized. So the likelihood that I will see the application of anybody in this room is very small. I usually see people from Texas for some reason. But so if any particular person doesn't make it through, it wasn't necessarily me until the interviews happen. But so anyway, what makes a good jet? We want folks who are adaptable and creative and are genuinely interested in both like a give and take kind of you know situation when it comes to Japan, where like you are willing to like share things about yourself and learn things about Japan, that you have a great sense of humor. Yeah, that's generally what we're looking for. And then this was a presentation that DC sent us, and then they asked me to put my stuff in here. So I'm going to just go through these real quick, and if you have questions, you can ask me. And if not, then you've seen this guy. He's great. I was in mostly northern Okinawa, so I didn't interact with the bases that much. As I mentioned, I had 6 schools the first 3 years and then 3. I transferred, which is unlikely. That doesn't happen super often. I can talk about it if folks want. In my second location, I taught special ed from kindergarten to high school. I had 6 cars in 5 years. That was not by choice. I do not recommend. Also not at the same time, just in case anybody thought that. I was in different support positions the whole time I was there, with the LGBTQ folks, and then for other things like, being geographically isolated, that kind of thing. As I mentioned earlier, Japan, like Okinawa, is closer to Taiwan than it is to Tokyo, and sometimes it took less time and money to go there or Seoul or Busan or places like that than it did to go to Tokyo or Osaka. And so I ended up, I feel, engaging in a lot more international travel than travel throughout Japan, which is just a thing that some folks sometimes don't realize is that while you're on jet, you can also explore other parts of Asia pretty easily and cheaply. I was able to be placed in Okinawa in part because I asked my first placement request was Okinawa, and I said I wanted to study Okinawan language trees, which in Okinawan is called Uchinaguchi. Um, and so I think that had a big part of why I was put in Okinawa. And then one of the Okinawan phrases that I think is particularly relevant to the JET program is Nankuru Naisa, which means whatever happens, happens. So this is that's all I got. So the website, I'll put the links for several of these things into the chat, but the jetprogramusa.org is the website. If you want to contact me, this phone number is not the best way to do it because I'm not in the office and they don't have call forwarding. Your best bet is to email me at this very long email address. And then if you follow the official JET program accounts on Facebook and Twitter, it's the best place to get hints and updates and deadline reminders and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to stop sharing and take a drink of this tea and then answer anybody's questions. Let's see. Okay. Alrighty. So the first question is, for the essay, would you prefer to read my story or would you prefer to read a more formation of skills? So it's a little bit of both a lot of the time. Like if you can work what your skills are into your story, that is helpful. But yeah, I as long as it answers both, like they give you a fairly long prompt, and I definitely shorten it when I say it's why you, why Japan. There's probably more, but those are like the main beats. And so reiterating what your skills are is certainly helpful. Um, and giving us a little bit of an idea of who you are. So like if you have an anecdote about Japan that is particularly interesting or moving, then that's helpful. Because like I said, you need to stand out. As long as you don't spend more than 5% of it talking about your favorite anime. There's so much of it, I swear to God. You can talk about anime, it's fine. Just don't tell me like you want a Naruto run through like somebody actually did. Um, but yeah, I think like yeah, a little bit of both is the answer to that question for me. Uh, so Simone has asked, how does one become involved in support positions? Great question. Um, so a lot of the time, like your first year, you're probably not going to be able to get too involved in things, but after that, a lot of the organizations will have elections, or you can just volunteer a lot of the time. So like when I was for Stonewall, I was a regional representative first, and then I was national president, which was kind of a trip from Okinawa. But I was like a normal member for a while before that. When it comes to the regional stuff, a lot of it is just like getting involved. And like mostly like you'll probably have to talk to AJET about a lot of that kind of stuff. So there are definitely like processes in place. A lot of them are elections. Sometimes that is both a good and bad thing because a lot of it turns into a little bit of a popularity contest on occasion, but a lot of things do. Best advice on how we can prepare for the program as an undergrad. So I feel like a lot of what we look for in folks is like certainly having any kind of like English teaching or tutoring experience or but outside of that, we'd if you have any kind of teaching or tutoring or mentoring or coaching experience in anything, being involved in local community kind of organizations, either as a long-term member or as a member of leadership, uh, being involved in like something that is very clearly meant to be intercultural or international, which doesn't necessarily mean like, bumping around all different, like interacting with folks whose background is outside of yours. Um, that kind of thing, essentially. Like those are some things that are pretty helpful, excuse me, as an undergrad, that would help your application other than getting any kind of experience teaching or studying Japanese language. Has COVID impacted JET program or the overall experience? Yes. So right now, Sava Sensei was asking earlier, I think before everybody got here, the folks who were supposed to leave yet, in part because they were supposed to leave in September because we had made room for the Olympics, um, and travel restrictions have not lifted yet. And so we have groups of folks who are waiting. Then we had to split them. It's been this whole process. So there are folks who are waiting for travel restrictions to be lifted, and then there are also folks who deferred their candidacy to depart in 2021, which is the first time we've ever had a deferral process available at all. So for that reason, I can't say for sure, but I can only assume that, some of the spots may be a little bit more competitive this year just because we have so many folks who are already slotted to leave in 2021. And so it may be a little bit more competitive this year to get a spot. When it comes to being over in Japan, it's really hard for me to say because I'm not boots on the ground over there. But I've heard from some folks that they're all remote. I've heard from some folks that they're hybrid and some that they're in person. It's kind of like asking like how are teachers in America dealing with COVID-19, and because anything that's nationally. But other than that, we're considering doing remote interviews. I'm really hoping we do remote interviews. But those are kind of the COVID situations that we've encountered so far. There's also whispers that there may be a policy in place where people will have to quarantine. That's not been put in stone yet, but that's all the things that I know. Let's see. Regarding placement preferences, is it better to ask for rural Japan or to not have a preference at all? It really, if you put no preference, they will definitely put you in a place. You can feel free to ask for whatever you actually want. Whether or not you get it is kind of a mixed bag. But like your placement preferences will not be the difference between you going and not going. I don't remember whether or not I said this or not earlier, but so the same way that you can ask for 3 specific placements in Japan and give reasons why. I don't know if they give reasons why, but your contracting organizations can ask for 3 specific qualities in their candidate. And so, for example, like I wanted to study Uchinaguchi, and so I have to be in Okinawa. So an American for my accent for different kinds of English contests, who could drive because I had 6 schools, and then who could speak Japanese because we're in northern Okinawa and not many people speak English. And so the stars aligned and I got what I wanted and they got what they wanted. But the person who was hired at the same time as me wanted Hokkaido. But she was also an American who drove and spoke Japanese. And so it's all kind of a roll. So yeah, I think if you prefer rural Japan, then you should certainly ask for it. If you don't, you can definitely try to ask for other places. But like giving those sorts of reasons that I mentioned earlier will probably help a little bit. But a lot of it is how many people, because like you may be perfect for wherever you're asking for, but all the ALTs that currently work there just don't leave that year. So there's nowhere to put you. So.
Adrian, I have a question related to that. I wonder if there's any advantage of like including the sister city or sister state, because then you could really serve as a kind of
definitely
coordinator.
Yes. Definitely. They love the sister city angle. And so does anybody happen to know what the sister city of Boston is? It's Kyoto. So if you really want to go to Kyoto, you can definitely work this city and mine are sister cities. I would like to facilitate the furthering of this relationship kind of angle. I think Massachusetts is sister states with Hokkaido also, if that's a thing that you want to do. But I think those are the things in Massachusetts specifically. There may be 1 or 2 more, I just don't remember. Oh man, there's so more in the chat. How was your experience integrating into Japanese culture and society? I am a terrible person to ask that to, in part because I had already studied Japanese and been on an exchange program before I got there. Um, and so I definitely had some things that were culture shock, and part of them were mostly just transitioning from being in Japan as a student to being in Japan as a teacher. Um, and then just being there for a very long time. Like, you know, I as like especially the transition from exchange student to teacher is that you are one of the only people nearby going through your experience. Where, you know, when you're an exchange kid, you can go back to the dorms and there's like all these folks from all over the place, and you'd be like, oh yeah, that was a really weird thing that happened today. Um, where on Jet you may be slightly isolated in that way. And so making connections really early on, like before you leave and in the first couple of different orientations, only just to go, I couldn't find what I wanted at the grocery store and it really ruined my day. Um, but did you experience xenophobia or racism at any point? When So Okinawa has a very particular kind of uh, like situation going on in that um, a large portion of all the American military bases in Asia are in Okinawa. And so folks in Okinawa, I feel sort of rightfully, have mixed feelings, to put it lightly, on Americans in general. Um, and so learning, not really learning, I kind of knew about that a little bit already, but kind of anticipating that anybody at any given point would probably, upon first seeing me, think I'm either a tourist or I might be with the military, and might have a very negative reaction to me being there, until I talk to them and say that, like, I'm not either of those things and I have strong feelings about the military myself. um, and all that kind of, like, it's mentally preparing to have the uh, I am not necessarily what you think I am discussion, and like whether or not you have the like bandwidth to do that is, you know, a really personal thing. But I feel like, you know, I definitely know that there is sort of like a hierarchy of foreigners as well. And so like my being a white person in Japan is going to be a very different experience than being a non-white person in Japan. And I think that part of why there are a lot of, oh, I should put these links in the chat. Part of why there are so many special interest groups is to kind of like have folks who you can talk to about the different experiences you're having. Like so like, you know, there were a lot of like, oh, for being a queer person, this was a thing that happened to me today that sucked. um, and I feel like a lot of the other special interest groups have a very similar thing going on, of like being like, you know, a person who is like Latinx, this was a thing that happened to me today that sucked. um, or that kind of thing. I mean, there is more to those groups than this is a thing that happened to me today that sucked. But I think that is one of the more useful reasons to join them. Um, see, does the Jet participant pay for the car they drive? Yes. Um, so more often than not, what's happening when you go on Jet is that you are taking over sometimes the apartment, and like so like there's always going to be, like 90% of the time, there's going to be a person whose position you are taking over. They are leaving, their Jet tenure is done. And so like there's going to be a certain amount of things that are there for you to take over if you so choose. They'll usually talk to you before you come over. You can arrange to either buy all their things or not buy all their things, in which case they'll sell it to other Jets. But for Jets in Japan, it's a little bit easier to buy cars, in part because there are different grades of cars. If you get a yellow plate or a K car, um, they're usually a lot smaller and made of less heavy material, but they're a lot cheaper. Like the most that I think I paid for a car in Japan was maybe like like $1,500, and the least that I paid was zero, because Somebody just had a car that they were like, look, I don't want it anymore. Do you want it? It's very creepy looking. And so I had a very creepy looking van for a long time because somebody didn't want it anymore. Um, and then the other thing is that Japan has insurance on the car and not on the individual. And so a lot of the time, this is the thing you learn eventually, is if somebody is selling you their car for very cheap, it's because there's no more insurance on it. And like the time where you're going to have to pay for the insurance is very close. And so you do have to pay for the car if you are in a place where they want you to drive. But usually you can find some kind of car or like a scooter or scooters. I don't think you need a different kind of license. If you got a motorcycle, you would need a motorcycle license. But yes, so there's that. Should we say or should we not say that we have a driver's license? Is there a benefit downside to that? So like I mentioned in the presentation, if you absolutely do not want to drive in Japan, you should not mention that you have a driver's license here in the US. Like I said, there have been a lot of times where Tokyo has taken dramatic liberties with what you have said in your application, where you say, oh, I would rather not drive, but I am capable of driving. They will hear, I am capable of driving. So if you don't want to drive in Japan, you don't have to worry about car stuff. You should not indicate on your application that you can drive. And anecdotally, that will generally lead you to problems in a more urban area because you need public transportation. That is kind of the benefits and the downsides to that. I don't remember if I mentioned it or not, but when you're in Japan, you can apply, or well, before you leave, you should apply for the international driver's permit, which you can get from AAA for like $20. You can have it for about a year and not have to worry about anything. And then once that time is coming to a close, you'll have to apply for the Japanese you'll have to get a Japanese driver's license. And the test is brutal. Most people fail it at least like 3-4 times. But you'll make it through eventually, in part just because they're very detail oriented. Those are all the questions that have been in the chat so far. So if anybody has more, you can put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself, either way.
Actually, Adrian, I just want to tell everyone in Japan, you can also go to many places just by using bicycle.
Yes.
If I could just add a couple of points that Adrian has presented about some tips or ideas about how to make yourself a more competitive candidate. I do think that all of you have some experiences working with people of different backgrounds and different cultures, whether you have been to Japan or not, or study abroad or not. So don't just focus on your connection with Japan, but your connection with people and citizens of the world and cultures of the world as well. And I think don't really just focus on yourself and why you like Japan and your hobbies and things like that, but really try to focus on the ideas of respect and humility and enthusiasm and interest in learning about other cultures and teaching and making a difference. Why do you do that? It's not just for yourself, it's for the better good of the cultures between the two countries, then the relationship between the two countries. Why do you want to teach the younger generation? It's really whether you will become a teacher or not. That's part of your job, so you have to talk about that. Why do you want to teach English? So those things are really important for being a Japanese teacher or ALT in Japan.
And John, our career services also help students when they apply for jobs.
Yes, yes.
Right?
So we can help students if they have questions about the application. We can critique their resume. So yes, we will definitely help out. And Adrian, I just want to give a shout out to you. That was a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Very thorough. Thank you.
I try.
Well, thank you so much. And I think
I don't know if Sensei is frozen for anybody else.
I think
Okay.
she's frozen.
Okay.
Yeah, she's frozen. I don't know if the
Oh.
snowy situation. Can we get her back or something? We will need to get her back before we close it out, but hopefully very soon.
Maybe her power went out too. There's
Oh.
a
Possible.
snowstorm around
Will
here.
that be- will
It
that-
took out mine when I first joined.
So most of you are graduating in either December or in May, right? So you're only eligible for this round if you are graduating in December or May. If you're graduating next year, it's not too early to plan. You can start planning for the following year. Now you have much more time to plan for it.
Mhm.
We have also some other activities for the Japan. For instance, on the 9th, we'll have a virtual exchange with BSU students and mainly from Professor Yungmei Wu's classes, Japanese culture, and also with the Wakayama University students. So if you are interested, that'd be great. We'll be, sending out information pretty soon. So you are very welcome to join. Probably around maybe 40 students or 50 students, half of them from Wakayama University and half of them from BSU. So you can make friends before you go, and with students in Japan. I'm sure that you are interested in traveling into Osaka or Wakayama area or Kyoto.
So it's November 9th, Monday night from 7 to 8:30 p.m. our time.
Mhm.
It's 9 to 10:30 a.m. their time on Tuesday. So if you're free Monday night, we'll send you the link, and either through Saba Sensei or just I can if I have your emails, or you can contact Emma, whatever. We'll find a way to give you the link.
Yeah, we will send out also a flyer, hopefully pretty, working with Study Abroad and Munich Center.
Great. I also didn't know it might be a good idea to plug Kansai University. Our exchange partner is offering online winter classes this winter 2021. So if you're curious about experiencing an online course with our exchange partner, you can always reach out to me and get more information about that. We have the application open for also in our study abroad database right now.
Right. So we're doing a lot of things with our 3 partner universities. We just mentioned this virtual exchange with Wakayama University for one time. We have a winter school with Kansai University. We also have a class exchange with Tokyo Gakuge University in education right now. So we are doing a lot of things with Tokyo and Osaka right now. The last time we had students going to Japan was as a group was almost like 2 years ago in 2018, summer 2018. So Dr. Yu was hoping to go to Japan last year, but it was canceled. Also, the exchange program was canceled last year. So unfortunately, that was the case. And anyway, I think working and teaching abroad and having an experience with Japan, traveling there is going to change your outlook, your way of looking at things about the world. So definitely. We used to have a lot more Japanese students on campus. Unfortunately, right now we don't have that opportunity for you to meet the Japanese students on campus. I think that's really a disadvantage. So it's even more important for you to get a chance to travel to Japan or work in Japan. when we have 20 Japanese students on campus, you can always meet them, but now we don't. Even before COVID-19, we didn't have too many Japanese students. So for studying Japan, it's important to have the direct contact with the locals, and not just Saba Sensei herself, but more people, right? Not just one person. So it's important to do that. Does she know my link?
I've been trying to check my email as to whether or not she's like, you know,
She must have power. Yeah. I guess I'll close at 11:45, and just hopefully she'll sign back within 5 minutes.
Sure. But yeah, if anybody has any questions about anything, like you can either ask me here. If you don't want to ask me here, I put my very long email in the chat. So anytime anybody has anything.
Do you have some jet gatherings? When you are assigned into those remote areas, do you gather together with your cohorts?
You mean before they leave or after they leave, or?
Yeah, when you are there.
Well, yeah, definitely. So, especially in the first couple of months, you have like a training orientation pretty early on, within the first few weeks. And then usually in November-ish, there's like a point when your entire prefecture comes together and does trainings together, usually at the prefectural education center, things like that. But there's always somebody who is trying to plan some kind of social gathering or event, either with your specific area or as like a community, like a combined thing with another group. So even in Okinawa, there was just like a certain group of folks who were just called the Outer Islands, because like Okinawa has tons of little tiny islands, and a lot of the time there's one jet on that island. And so the Outer Islands would sometimes get groups together to okay, well, everybody, let's all go to Tonaki at this time, or they'll have like a remote movie night or something like that. So they actually probably did a lot more like things like this before we all had to start doing this anyway.
Is English a required course in the schools?
Oh, I got the email.
Oh, what'd she say? English is a required course, at least junior high and above. I think it only recently became a required course for 5th and 6th grade, and they may be starting to creep into 3rd and 4th grade, actually. I think technically it used to be that 5th and 6th grade were not necessarily English class, but they were foreign language activity time. And so a lot of the textbook materials not only did English, but they also did a lot of the Romance languages, as well as Chinese and Korean, and maybe German sometimes. I feel like it's likely that will probably shift down again, so that 3rd and 4th grade will be foreign language activity time, and 5th and 6th will be English class. So,
I have a question.
Sure.
Osaka and Okinawa, are those popular preferences?
Osaka's pretty popular. Okinawa is like within maybe the top 5 or 6. But I feel like Tokyo and Kyoto are definitely up there.
So say I were to apply and I were to put like Tokyo, Osaka, Okinawa, would that like hinder my my application in any way? But those are just preferences, right?
Yeah. So so a lot of the time, so your placements are never going to be the thing that don't get you through. So a lot of this, like I said, a lot of it is just this very Tetris of we don't know in the application process how many spots there will be anywhere, because people in Japan haven't had that discussion with their contracting organization yet about whether or not they're going to stay. because we're only open till about Thanksgiving. I think they usually have that talk somewhere around Christmas or New Year's. But so I think one of the things to think about with placement requests in particular is that they're requests and not requirements. So Tokyo might look at that and go, okay, well, we can try, but there's no more spots. And so if there's no more spots in any of those three, or if those contracting organizations are looking for a very specific sort of person, for like, I know, so I said the contracting organization like 2-3 towns over from mine wanted an Australian man, from this particular university. Like that was how specific they got with who they wanted. And so it's all kind of a mixed bag. And so I know some folks who were like, these are the 3 that I listed. I got nowhere near any of those. And so it's also the case that, you know, if you have like a small window right after you get your placement, where if for whatever reason this is completely untenable and like you will just definitely not enjoy yourself or be able to do your duties if you go to Japan and you're placed in this location, you have a space of maybe a few days to pull out of the program without there being too many consequences, and then you can reapply. I don't know if you could reapply the next year, but maybe the year after that without too much trouble.
Actually, you don't have to really think about just going to Tokyo and Osaka, because in Japan there's so many small cities and small towns in different regions, and I think you'll find it very charming in different parts of Japan. There are 4 islands of Japan. In Honshu, in the main island, there are so many different regions that have very interesting cities. That you know, some areas are famous for cherry blossoms and for you know, the sceneries, for foliage and things like that. And then you have the other side, like the Shikoku area and the Kyushu area in the western part of Japan is a little bit warmer. And of course, Hokkaido is a little bit more like the weather of Boston. So yeah, you can have different seasons. And Okinawa is very much like North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida, and
Humid all the time.
yeah,
All the time.
so it's like different weathers, and Japan is pretty diverse, even it's a small country. And the train system is so convenient; you can always go there
So
in the weekend.
yeah. One of the things that I miss most about Japan, especially living in Boston, is that the you will weep going onto almost any other public transportation system after this, except maybe South Korea. Like, it's just so nice. It's on time and it's clean. It goes so many places. And then you try to get on the red line in Boston, and then you're
Yeah,
just
the
like,
whole East Asian
I think
region.
it's on fire. I think that's what's happening right now.
Anyway, Sava Sensei wrote back to us and said that she lost internet connection. She wanted to thank Adrian. So on behalf of Bridgewater State University, thank you again. The Japanese consulate has always been a good friend of us.
Yeah, thank you so
And
much for having me.
students, good luck on your application, and start working on it. Whenever you have questions about application, you can always ask Dr. Savas or myself or the study abroad office or Dr. Yu. Good luck.
Have a good
Thank
day,
you
everybody.
again.
Enjoy the
Thank you.
snow.
Thank you,
Thank you
Adrian.
very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice seeing you guys.
Nice
Bye.
seeing everyone.
Bye.
Bye.